The fluorescent lights above buzzed faintly, casting a pale glow over the sterile hospital room. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor was the only sound breaking the eerie silence, aside from the soft murmurs of my 6-year-old twins, Arav and Anaya, playing on the cold linoleum floor. My body trembled as I gripped my phone, my fingers slick with sweat, my vision blurring from the agony coursing through my abdomen. Every breath felt like shards of glass scraping against my insides. I had never felt so alone. With shaking hands, I hit the video call button, my last shred of hope clinging to the belief that my parents would understand, that they would put aside their plans just this once, that they would choose me. The screen flickered and my mother's face appeared. Her perfectly styled auburn hair rested on her shoulders, her makeup pristine, her gold earrings shimmering under the bright lights of a venue. The muffled hum of a crowd buzzed behind her. She was somewhere lively, somewhere exciting, somewhere that wasn't here. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Mom," my voice cracked. "Please, I need help. I'm in the hospital. The pain is unbearable. Can you take care of Arav and Anaya just for the night? Please." Her lips pursed in annoyance, and then she sighed as if I had just asked her for something utterly ridiculous. "Maya, we've talked about this," she said sharply. "We have plans, important plans." I blinked, my mind struggling to comprehend her words. "Mom, I just came out of emergency surgery. I have no one else. The twins, don't you dare ask us to cancel our plans again," she snapped, her voice cutting through me like a blade. "We've had these Elton John tickets for months." The finality in her voice crushed me. The realization hit hard, winding me worse than the post-surgical pain radiating through my abdomen. I tried again, my voice barely above a whisper. "But Mom, A new voice joined the conversation. My father. "Maya, you're being dramatic," he said dismissively. "You're always like this. We've done more than enough for you over the years." Done more than enough? I wanted to laugh. Or maybe scream. I had given them thousands of dollars each month to help with their mortgage. I had been the one to drive them to their doctor's appointments, to listen to my mother's endless complaints about life, to reassure them that I would always take care of them. And yet, when I needed them, truly needed them, they weren't even willing to spare a single night. "Just call a neighbor," my mother continued impatiently, "or hire a sitter. You always figure things out, don't you?" Tears stung my eyes as I gritted my teeth, forcing myself to breathe through the pain. My fingers clenched the hospital blanket as I fought back the sob that threatened to escape. I had always figured things out, because I had no other choice. I stared at their faces, waiting, hoping, please, just once, choose me. But my mother only sighed again, rolling her eyes. "We need to go," she said briskly. "The show's about to start." Then, just like that, the screen went dark. The call had ended. A sharp, broken gasp escaped me as the weight of their rejection crushed my chest. I wasn't sure how long I sat there, staring at the black screen, unable to move, unable to think. My mind reeled, trying to process the fact that my own parents, people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, had chosen a concert over me, over their grandchildren, over my pain. A small tug on my hospital gown pulled me from my trance. "Mommy?" Arav's small voice was laced with worry. His big brown eyes, identical to Arjun's, peered up at me with innocent concern. "Are you okay?" Anaya shuffled closer, clutching her favorite stuffed bunny. "You're crying," she whispered. I hadn't even realized the tears were streaming down my face. I forced a smile, though it wavered at the edges. "I'm okay, sweetheart." My voice cracked. "Mommy's just tired." Arav's tiny fingers reached up to wipe away a tear that slipped down my cheek. "Don't be sad, Mommy." I pulled both of them into a weak embrace, ignoring the sharp sting of my stitches. They were so small, so fragile, and yet they were everything to me. I had lost my husband 6 months ago in a tragic accident. I had carried the weight of grief, of single parenthood, of financial struggles, all alone. And now, I realized something painfully clear. I was truly alone. A soft knock at the door made me look up. Priya, my nurse, stood there, watching me with quiet concern. She had been here throughout my ordeal, silently witnessing my struggle. Without a word, she walked over and placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Did they—" She hesitated. I swallowed hard, then shook my head. "No." My voice was hoarse. "They're going to a concert." A flicker of something passed through her eyes, pity perhaps, or maybe anger on my behalf. She didn't say anything at first. Instead, she knelt down beside the twins, offering them a warm smile. "Would you two like some juice?" she asked softly. "I think we have some apple juice in the fridge." Arav and Anaya perked up at the mention of juice, nodding eagerly. As Priya led them toward the small refrigerator in the corner, she glanced at me over her shoulder and whispered, "You're not alone, Maya. You have them, and you have people who care." Her words nearly shattered me all over again. I had spent so long believing that my parents were my last hope, that they were family, and family was supposed to be there no matter what. But I was done begging for love that wasn't freely given. As I wiped my tears and watched my children giggle over their juice, something inside me hardened. This was my breaking point. And from here on out, I would rebuild, not for them, but for us. Memories have a cruel way of creeping up on you, especially when you're at your weakest. Lying in that hospital bed, staring at the ceiling while my twins napped beside me, I let my mind wander. To the past, to the years of silent rejection, to the painful realization that I had always been nothing more than an afterthought. It had always been about her, Ria, the golden child, the perfect one. From the moment she was born, it was as if the sun rose and set in her eyes. She was the one showered with affection, the one our parents doted on, the one who could do no wrong. And I? I was the shadow in the corner, the quiet, responsible one. The one who never asked for much because I had learned early on that asking only led to disappointment. I still remember my high school graduation. I had been ecstatic, clutching my diploma with trembling hands, searching the crowd for my parents. I had graduated with honors, a feat I had worked tirelessly for. But instead of pride, instead of joy, I was met with a rushed hug from my mother and a distracted, "Good job, sweetheart," because Ria had just landed a small role in a local commercial. That was all that mattered that day. Not my achievement, not my years of hard work, but Ria's 15 seconds of screen time selling a brand of cereal no one even remembered. It became a pattern. When I got accepted into college, my parents barely acknowledged it. But when Ria took a few art classes and submitted a painting to a small-town exhibit, they threw a celebratory dinner. When I worked 2 jobs to put myself through university, they barely noticed. But when Ria decided to drop out of college to pursue her dreams, they supported her completely, funding every whim she had. Still, I told myself it didn't matter. I worked hard, I built a life for myself, and I refused to resent my sister. It wasn't her fault that our parents placed her on a pedestal while they left me to figure out life alone. But sometimes I wondered if she even noticed. Did she realize that every time she shined, it was at the cost of dimming me? I shook off the thought, closing my eyes as another memory surfaced. My wedding. Arjun and I had been deeply in love, and despite our limited budget, we had planned a beautiful ceremony in a quiet countryside venue. It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, until my parents made it clear how much of an inconvenience it was for them. "Do we really have to drive 2 hours for this?" my mother had complained weeks before the wedding. "Why not have it closer to the city, somewhere more convenient?" They showed up late. They left early. They acted as if it was just another event to get through. Meanwhile, when Ria's art piece was featured in a magazine months later, they hosted a party. They beamed with pride, paraded her success to friends and family, and acted as if she had just won an Oscar. And then came Arav and Anaya, my beautiful twins, my heart and soul. I thought for a fleeting moment that their birth would change things, that my parents would finally soften, finally realize that they had a daughter who still wanted to be loved, who still hoped, despite everything, that she and her children mattered. They visited once, one single visit, where my mother wrinkled her nose at Anaya's crying, and my father muttered that Arav looked too much like Arjun. As if that was a bad thing. They didn't offer to help, didn't ask how I was managing, didn't once hold their grandchildren with the warmth that I had seen them shower upon Ria when she was little. And then they left. Not just my home, but my life, in the ways that truly mattered. And still, I had tried. I had paid for their mortgage when they retired early. I had sent them $3,000 every month, money that I could have used to secure my children's future, to ease my own burdens. I had done it out of duty, out of the foolish belief that maybe, just maybe, they would finally see me. But the truth was a jagged, cruel thing. They had seen me. They had always seen me. They just didn't care. A sharp pain jolted through my abdomen, dragging me back to the present. I exhaled shakily, opening my eyes to find Priya standing by my bedside, her gaze filled with quiet understanding. "How are you feeling?" she asked gently. I swallowed hard. "Like an idiot." Her brows furrowed. "Why?" I let out a bitter laugh. "Because I spent my entire life trying to be good enough for people who never even tried to love me back." Priya didn't rush to fill the silence. She simply sat beside me, her presence warm, reassuring. "They failed you," she said after a long pause. "Not the other way around." I clenched my jaw, blinking back the sting of tears. "Failed me." The words settled in my chest, heavy and undeniable. For years I had convinced myself that if I just tried harder, if I just gave more, if I just loved enough, my parents would one day love me the way they loved Ria. But love wasn't something you could earn. It was something that should be given freely, and they had never wanted to give it to me. My fingers curled around the blanket, my breathing unsteady. I had spent a lifetime sacrificing for people who wouldn't even sacrifice one night for me, and I was done. Priya gave my hand a reassuring squeeze before standing. "You need to rest, Maya," she said softly. "And when you're ready, you need to start choosing yourself. No one else will do it for you." I watched as she walked away, her words echoing in my mind. For the first time in my life, I realized I wasn't just mourning my parents' betrayal. I was mourning the illusion that they had ever truly been my family. Pain. It wasn't just physical. It was emotional, raw, a deep ache that no amount of painkillers could dull. I woke up in a blur of sterile white, the rhythmic beeping of machines filling the silent hospital room. My body felt heavy, sluggish from the anesthesia, but the weight pressing down on my chest had nothing to do with the surgery. It was something deeper, something I couldn't escape. The truth. I had gone into surgery alone, not because I didn't have people in my life, but because the ones who should have been there, the ones who claimed to love me, had chosen a concert over their own daughter's emergency. A sharp pang of loneliness twisted inside me, more painful than any incision on my body. Then I heard it. Soft, muffled voices from the other side of the room. "Arav, don't wake Mama," a gentle voice whispered. "Let her rest, sweetheart." Priya. I blinked against the harsh hospital lights, my vision focusing on the kind-hearted nurse who had been by my side since the moment I collapsed. She was crouched beside a small hospital cot where my twins lay curled up together, their tiny bodies wrapped in soft blankets. Arav stirred, letting out a small whimper before Anaya's little hand found his. Even in sleep, they comforted each other. Tears burned the back of my eyes. At least they have each other. Priya turned, noticing my open eyes. Relief softened her expression. "Maya," she said gently, stepping closer. "How are you feeling?" I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "Like I've been hit by a truck." A faint smile tugged at her lips. "That's normal after major surgery." She poured me a glass of water, holding it to my lips as I took a few slow sips. "The procedure was successful, but you need rest." Rest. The concept seemed foreign to me. I couldn't afford to rest. I had 2 children depending on me, and yet, for the first time in my life, I felt like my body had given me no choice. I exhaled shakily. My kids. They're fine, Priya assured me. But I knew you'd worry, which is why I arranged something. She stepped aside, and another woman entered the room. She was tall, poised, with a warm but professional demeanor. Dressed in a simple yet elegant outfit, she carried an air of quiet confidence. "This is Annika," Priya introduced. "She's a professional nanny, one of the best. She specializes in working with children who've experienced trauma." Trauma. The word cut deep, even though I knew it was true. My babies had lost their father. They had watched their mother collapse. They had been abandoned by the very people I had begged for help. Annika gave me a reassuring smile. "Priya told me about your situation, and I'd be honored to help you, Maya. You need time to heal, and your little ones need stability." I stared at her, my heart tightening. I wasn't used to this. Kindness without strings, support without judgment. But before I could respond, my phone buzzed on the bedside table. A familiar dread coiled in my stomach. I knew who it was before I even looked. With trembling fingers, I reached for my phone. A flood of messages glared back at me. "Dad, you're becoming a real burden, Maya." "Dad, we deserve to enjoy our retirement without your problems." "Mom, do you know how expensive these tickets were? We had a wonderful time, by the way." "Dad, stop acting like a victim. You should have planned better. It's not our fault you can't handle life." I felt sick. Not once did they ask if I had made it through surgery. Not once did they ask if Arav and Anaya were okay. Their only concern was that I was inconveniencing them. A bitter laugh bubbled in my throat, though it held no humor. Priya frowned as she took in my expression. "Maya?" I handed her the phone, my hands shaking too much to hold it. She scanned the messages, her face darkening with anger. She cut herself off, exhaling sharply. "I don't understand how parents can be this cruel." I looked away, my chest constricting. Neither do I. For so long, I had made excuses for them. I had told myself that maybe they didn't know how to show love, that maybe, if I just gave a little more, they'd finally see me. But they did see me, and they had chosen, time and time again, to look away. Priya's voice softened. "Maya, you don't owe them anything." My throat tightened. "They're my parents." She met my gaze with a steadiness I didn't have. "And you are their daughter. But love is supposed to be a two-way street. They don't get to take and take while leaving you with nothing." Annika stepped forward. "She's right. You've done enough, Maya. More than enough." A tear slipped down my cheek. "Then why does it hurt so much?" Priya sighed, sitting beside me. "Because you still wish they were different. You still love them even when they don't deserve it." I let out a shaky breath. She was right. I had spent my whole life chasing their approval, their love, only to realize that they had never been willing to give it freely. Annika placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "You focus on healing. Let me take care of the twins. We'll take it one day at a time." I hesitated. Letting go of control had never been easy for me, but as I glanced at my babies, my entire world, I knew I had no choice. I nodded slowly. "Okay." Annika smiled. "Good. Now get some rest." As I lay back against the pillows, exhaustion pulling me under, one final thought settled in my mind. I was done. Done begging for love. Done sacrificing myself for people who would never do the same for me. I had given them enough. It was time to choose myself. The night air was thick with silence, the only sounds in my hospital room being the soft hum of machines and the steady breathing of my sleeping children. Arav and Anaya curled up together on the small cot beside me, their tiny hands clasped as if seeking comfort in each other. My heart clenched at the sight. How had my babies, so young, already learned to rely on themselves because the adults in their lives had failed them? I stared at the dim glow of my phone screen, my finger hovering over the banking app. My parents' names stared back at me. The automatic transfer of $3,000 set to be deducted from my account tomorrow, just like it had been every month for the past few years. For years I had given without question. For years I had prioritized their comfort over my own struggles, and when I had needed them most, they had laughed in my face and chosen a concert. A bitter taste rose in my throat as I clenched my jaw, my heart thudding with a mix of anger and finality. I pressed the cancel button. The confirmation flashed on the screen, and just like that, the financial tether between us was severed. I wasn't just cutting off the money, I was cutting them off. Completely. My hands trembled as I opened my messages. I took a deep breath and typed, "Me, my children and I deserve better. Do not contact me again." I hit send before I could second-guess myself. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, my phone vibrated violently in my hands, my parents' names flashing across the screen. The messages poured in, venomous and cruel. Mom. Excuse me? Dad. Maya, don't be ridiculous. Turn the transfer back on. We have bills to pay. Mom. How ungrateful can you be? We raised you, and this is how you repay us? Dad. After everything we've done for you? You're selfish, Maya. Mom. We sacrificed so much for you, and you cut us off like this? Over a stupid surgery? A sharp, bitter laugh escaped my lips. A stupid surgery? I could have died on that operating table. My children could have lost their last surviving parent, and they had the audacity to act like I was being unreasonable? I placed my phone face down on the blanket, my fingers gripping the fabric tightly. I wouldn't respond. I couldn't respond. This was what they did. Every time. They twisted reality, manipulated emotions, made me feel like the villain for finally setting boundaries. I had to remind myself, I am not the villain here. The messages didn't stop. In fact, they got worse. They dragged my name through the mud, sending messages to extended family, crafting a story where I was the ungrateful daughter who abandoned her loving parents. I could only imagine the lies they were spinning. Then, my phone rang again. Not my parents this time. Ria. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail. My younger sister had always been the golden child, the one they adored, the one who could do no wrong in their eyes. We had never been particularly close. How could we be, when my parents had spent years setting us up as rivals without her even realizing it? But something in me told me to answer. I swiped to accept the call. Hello? My voice was hoarse, drained. Maya. Ria's voice was laced with disbelief, as if she had just uncovered something that shattered her world. What is going on? I sighed. You'll have to be more specific. I just got off the phone with Mom and Dad. They said you had some minor procedure and freaked out over nothing, that you cut them off out of spite, that you're punishing them for enjoying their retirement. A humorless chuckle escaped my lips. Is that what they told you? Yes, Ria admitted. But then her voice softened. But something didn't feel right, so I started asking questions. My heart pounded. And? They didn't even mention your surgery until I pressed them, Ria confessed. Then I called the hospital. She took a deep breath. Maya, you almost died. I closed my eyes, swallowing against the lump in my throat. Yes. Silence stretched between us, heavy and filled with unspoken emotions. They said you were being dramatic, Ria murmured, her voice filled with guilt. I believed them. I always believe them. Tears welled in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. You weren't the only one. There was another long pause before Ria spoke again, her voice hesitant but determined. Maya, I'm so sorry. My breath hitched. I had waited my whole life to hear those words from someone in my family. I didn't know, she continued, voice breaking. I always thought you were just distant, that you didn't want to be close to me, but now I see it. They pushed us apart, and I let them. A tear slipped down my cheek. It wasn't your fault, Ria. But it was, she whispered. I should have seen it sooner. I didn't know what to say. For years, I had resented Ria without even realizing that she, too, was a victim of our parents' manipulation, just in a different way. I want to fix this, Ria said, her voice firmer now. I want to fix us, if you'll let me. I wiped at my cheeks. my heart aching with a mix of pain and cautious hope. "I'd like that," Ria exhaled, as if releasing years of unseen weight. "Good." For the first time in a long time, I felt something shift inside me. A door I thought had been permanently closed creaked open, just a little. Not for my parents, never for them, but for the sister I thought I had lost, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The first morning home from the hospital, I woke up to an unfamiliar sense of quiet. Not the eerie kind that pressed down on you, but a peaceful kind. One that whispered of new beginnings. The air smelled of fresh laundry and the faint scent of lavender from the diffuser Annika had set up in the corner. It was a small thing, but it made my apartment feel less like a battlefield and more like a home again. Annika was already up, humming softly in the kitchen as she prepared breakfast. Arav and Anaya were giggling over something, their laughter filling the air like music. For the first time in months, I didn't feel entirely alone. I sat up slowly, wincing at the dull ache still lingering from my surgery. My body was healing, but my heart? That would take much longer. "Good morning, Mama," Anaya chirped as she peeked into my room, her big brown eyes bright with excitement. "Good morning, sweetheart," I murmured, opening my arms. She ran into them, careful but eager, as Arav trailed behind her. "Annika made pancakes," Arav announced proudly, as if he had personally supervised the process. "With extra chocolate chips," I smiled, stroking his hair. "Then I better get out there before you two eat them all." The small, simple moment grounded me. My children were happy, safe. That was all that mattered. Starting over, with Annika's help, I slowly started piecing my life back together. The days of relying on my parents, financially, emotionally, or even just for the illusion of family, were over. I knew I had to stand on my own, not just for myself, but for Arav and Anaya. The support group for widowed parents was my first step. Walking into that room for the first time had felt like stepping onto a stage under a spotlight, my grief on full display. But as I listened to the stories of others, stories of loss, resilience, and rebuilding, I realized I wasn't alone. I shared my own story hesitantly at first, but as the weeks passed, the words flowed easier. There was no judgment, only understanding. For the first time in months, I had a space where I didn't have to be strong all the time. I also needed to find a way to support myself financially. My previous job had been too demanding to juggle with being a single parent, but I had always been good at web design. That's when the idea struck me. Memorial websites, a place where people could honor their lost loved ones, preserving their memories in a way that felt permanent. It started as a small project, but soon, word spread. My designs were personal, heartfelt, tailored to each grieving family's needs. People reached out, sharing their stories, trusting me to craft something meaningful. Each website I built felt like more than just work. It was healing, both for my clients and for myself. My parents' downfall. While I was rebuilding, my parents were falling apart. For years, they had lived in luxury, not through hard work, but through my financial sacrifices. Their early retirement had never been sensible. It had been funded by my blind devotion, my desperation to prove my worth to them. But now? The money had stopped flowing. I heard about their struggles through whispers from extended family, but I didn't care enough to check in. They had built a life on my labor, and now that foundation was crumbling beneath them. The first thing to go was their boat, a yacht they had bought under the guise of needing to enjoy their golden years. Next was their vacation timeshare, the one they had used to post pictures of themselves on beaches while I was home juggling work, grief, and 2 toddlers. But even that wasn't enough to keep them afloat. Their mortgage payments were overdue. Creditors were calling. Their savings had dried up long ago. Still, not once did they reach out with an apology. Not once did they acknowledge the pain they had caused. Instead, they painted me as the villain, the ungrateful daughter who abandoned her parents in their time of need. It didn't matter. For the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to earn their love. I wasn't waiting for their approval. I was free. And freedom, I realized, was priceless. The knock on my door was sharp, insistent. It was the kind of knock that wasn't just requesting entry, it was demanding it. Arav and Anaya were in the living room, playing with their building blocks, their innocent giggles filling the air. I wiped my hands on a kitchen towel, my heart already sinking. Something in my gut told me this wasn't a friendly visit. When I opened the door, the sight of my parents standing there sent a cold shiver down my spine. My father's expression was tight, his lips pressed into a firm line. My mother, standing beside him, had her arms crossed over her chest, her eyes filled with a mix of desperation and arrogance. "What are you doing here?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. My father wasted no time. "We need money, Maya." I let out a slow breath, already exhausted before the conversation even began. "You need what?" I asked, folding my arms. "We're behind on the mortgage," my father continued, his tone clipped. "We need $144,000 to catch up." I almost laughed at the absurdity. The same parents who couldn't be bothered to check on me after my surgery, who had chosen a concert over their own daughter's emergency, were now standing at my doorstep, expecting me to fix their financial mess. I leaned against the doorframe, shaking my head. "You should have thought of that before choosing a cruise over your grandchildren." My father's face darkened. "You're being unreasonable, Maya." "Unreasonable?" I repeated, my voice icy. "You ignored me when I was in the hospital, you called me a burden, and now you expect me to hand you over 6 figures? My mother's lips trembled as she took a step forward, her voice suddenly soft, the pity act sliding into place like a well-rehearsed performance. "We're your parents," she said, as if that was supposed to mean something. "You owe us." I swallowed down the bitter laugh bubbling up in my throat. "Owe you?" I repeated. "For what? A lifetime of being treated like an afterthought? For watching you shower Rhea with love, while I had to fight for every scrap of affection?" My father's jaw clenched. "You're being dramatic." "No, I was dramatic when I begged you for help, and you told me you had better things to do," I shot back. "Now you're standing here not because you suddenly care, but because you need money. And the answer is no." My mother's eyes glistened with unshed tears, but I didn't trust them. She was always good at crying when it suited her. "Please, Maya," she whispered. "We don't have anywhere else to turn." I exhaled sharply. "I'm not abandoning you," I said, my voice softer now, but unwavering. "I'm choosing my children over your selfishness." For once, there was no hesitation in my words, no lingering guilt, just the quiet realization that I was finally free. And with that, I closed the door. It started with a phone call. I had just put Arav and Anaya down for their nap when my phone buzzed. Seeing Rhea's name flash across the screen sent a wave of hesitation through me. For years, our relationship had been strained, shaped by the favoritism our parents had so blatantly displayed. She had been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, while I was always the afterthought. Still, I answered. "Hello? Maya." Rhea's voice wavered, and I immediately knew something was wrong. She sounded nothing like the confident, carefree sister I had grown up resenting. I sat down on the couch, gripping the phone tightly. "What's wrong?" There was silence on the other end, a deep inhale. Then I confronted them. My heart thudded. I didn't have to ask who them was. "What happened?" I asked, my voice calm but wary. "They lied to me, Maya," she whispered, her voice thick with regret. "They told me you were exaggerating, that you chose to cut them off over something petty. They made it seem like you were being dramatic, like you always were the difficult one." I closed my eyes, biting back the familiar sting of hurt. Of course they had. That was their pattern, playing the victims, twisting the truth, painting me as the selfish, ungrateful daughter. "But I didn't believe them," Rhea continued, her voice stronger now. "I started asking questions. I reached out to Aunt Mira, and she told me everything. How they bragged about ditching you for the concert, how they called you a burden instead of helping you when you needed them the most." I exhaled slowly, letting the words settle. "I should have seen it sooner," she said, and this time her voice broke. I feel so ashamed, Maya. You were always there for them and they treated you like you were disposable, and She let out a shaky breath. "I let them turn me against you." I didn't say anything right away. Not because I didn't believe her, but because years of hurt don't just disappear overnight. "I was jealous of you," Ria admitted, and those words hit harder than I expected. "You were always the responsible one, the strong one. They never let me fail because they thought I was too special, but they never let you rest because they expected you to survive on your own. And you did. You always did." I blinked rapidly, feeling emotions I didn't know how to name. "I don't know how to fix this," she whispered, "but I want to try, if you'll let me." For the first time in my life, I heard real sincerity in her voice. Not the tone of a sister competing for our parents' love, but a sister who wanted me. I swallowed past the lump in my throat. "I won't lie, Ria. It hurt. It still does." "I know," she murmured, "and I don't expect you to forgive me overnight. But please, let me prove that I'm not them." A long pause stretched between us. Then I let out a deep breath. "We'll take it one step at a time," I said softly. And for the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't walking this road alone. It arrived on an ordinary morning, tucked between a stack of bills and promotional flyers. A simple white envelope with my name scrawled in my mother's familiar looping handwriting. I stared at it for a long time. It had been months since I had last spoken to my parents, months of silence after I had slammed the door in their faces when they demanded money. In that time, I had begun to heal, to build a life where their absence no longer haunted me. But now, here was this letter, threatening to pull me back into the past. My hands trembled as I tore it open. "Maya, I don't deserve your time, but I need to say this. I see now how much I failed you. I was cruel when you needed kindness, indifferent when you needed love. And the truth is, I was jealous of you. You were always strong. You never needed our approval like Ria did. You survived every disappointment we threw your way, and in some twisted way that made me resent you. Because I was never that strong. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want you to know that your father and I are in therapy. We are trying. We are learning things about ourselves that we should have learned years ago. I hope one day you can see that we are changing. I hope one day you can give us another chance. But if you can't, I understand. We just want you to know, we are sorry. Mom." I let out a slow breath, reading the words again. She was jealous of me? I had spent my entire life feeling like the lesser child, the unworthy one. I had bent over backward trying to earn even a fraction of the love they so freely gave to Raya. And now my mother was telling me that all along she had resented me for my resilience. I didn't know how to feel. A part of me ached for the apology I had longed for since childhood. Another part of me, the one that had been betrayed too many times, whispered that this was just another manipulation. I set the letter down and exhaled, torn between hope and skepticism. Could people like my parents truly change? Or was this just another empty promise meant to lure me back into their web? I didn't have an answer yet. But I knew one thing for sure. This time, I wouldn't be so easy to fool. The cafe was quiet, the soft hum of conversation filling the space as I sat at a corner table, my hands wrapped around a cup of tea that had long since gone cold. My heart pounded against my ribs as I stared at the entrance, waiting. I wasn't sure why I had agreed to this meeting. Maybe a part of me wanted closure, or maybe, despite everything, a sliver of hope still remained. When the door finally opened, my parents stepped inside. My mother looked smaller than I remembered, her usual air of arrogance replaced by something I couldn't quite name. My father, once so sure of himself, walked hesitantly, his gaze darting around the cafe as if expecting me to change my mind and walk away. They spotted me and approached the table cautiously. My mother clutched her purse tightly, my father exhaled shakily before speaking. "Maya," he said, his voice hoarse, Thank you for meeting us." I gave a curt nod, keeping my expression neutral. For a long moment, no one spoke. The silence stretched between us, thick with years of unspoken words and unresolved pain. Then, finally, my father took a deep breath. "I've been a terrible father," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've failed you in more ways than I can count." I swallowed hard. It was strange hearing those words from him, words I had dreamed of hearing but never expected to. "I don't deserve your forgiveness," he continued, his eyes glassy with unshed tears. "But I want to earn it, if you'll let me." My mother shifted beside him. "We know words aren't enough," she added. "That's why we're in therapy. We're trying to unlearn the mistakes we made, to understand the damage we caused you. We don't expect things to go back to how they were, but—" She hesitated. "We don't want to lose you forever." I studied them carefully, searching for signs of manipulation, for any hint that this was just another one of their games. But for the first time in my life, I didn't see entitlement in their eyes. I saw regret. That didn't mean I was ready to forgive. I set my cup down and folded my hands in front of me. "If you're genuinely committed to change, we can start small," I said, my tone firm. "Supervised visits with the twins." My mother's lips parted in surprise, as if she hadn't expected me to give them even that much. "But understand this," I continued, my voice unwavering. "My children will only have relationships with people who respect their mother." My father nodded, his throat bobbing as he swallowed hard. "We understand." I wasn't sure if they truly did, not yet. But for the first time in a long time I was willing to give them a chance, to prove, through actions rather than words, that they could be different. But this time, I would be the one setting the rules. The scent of freshly brewed coffee filled my new home, mingling with the faint laughter of Arav and Anaya playing in the living room. The house was smaller than the one I had shared with Arjun, but it was warm, filled with light, and, most importantly, filled with love. As I stood in the kitchen preparing dinner, I marveled at how much had changed in just a few months. I was no longer a woman desperate for her parents' approval, no longer shackled by the weight of their neglect. I had stepped out of their shadows and into a life that I had built entirely on my own. My business had taken off. What started as a small side project, designing memorial websites for grieving families, had turned into something deeply fulfilling. Each story I helped preserve reminded me of Arjun, of the love we had shared, and the strength I had found in his absence. It was healing in a way I never expected. Ria had become a constant presence in my life. The sister I had once resented for always being our parents' favorite had now become my strongest ally. She showed up for me in ways they never had, helping with the twins, celebrating my small victories, and simply listening when the weight of grief became too much. One evening, as I curled up on the couch with a cup of tea, I heard the soft chime of my phone, a message from my mother. "We made an appointment with our therapist to talk about setting boundaries and making amends. We know we have a long way to go, but we want to keep trying. No pressure, just wanted you to know." I stared at the words for a long moment, feeling something I hadn't expected: peace. For the first time in my life, my parents weren't demanding, manipulating, or trying to guilt me. They were simply telling me they were trying, and for now, that was enough. I placed the phone down and turned my attention back to my children. Arav and Anaya were curled up on the rug, flipping through picture books. Their giggles filled the space, their tiny hands reaching for me as I joined them. I had lost Arjun, but in his absence, I had found something even more valuable, myself. And in finding myself, I had built a life worth living.